everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. Another Monday night, the trio is back. I am your host, as always, Timuchin over here in Chicago, and with us is the usual gang, making his entrance official by popping a can of God knows what, more than like the Guinness straight from the can, is Bickler with us. Bickler, what's happening?
You gotta start the show with controversy, don't you?
Keep the
Just happy to be here.
And how about Gally? Gally, what's happening, man? How are things over there?
It's good. It's a celebratory night in the Galvin household. My wife turned 40 years old today, which probably means I'm in real deep shit exactly 2 minutes into this thing for announcing that.
Yeah.
But not only is she amazing.
You two are just killing it.
Yeah, not only is she just absolutely amazing in all ways, and as we've talked about in this podcast in the past, much better than her husband who hosts a fantasy football show at Playing Fantasy Soccer. She is pretty amazing, and tonight she was like, "Yeah, no, we'll just go to a normal dinner, and then you can get back to do your podcast." Or maybe she was just really tired after a 5.5 hour ride home, and she really just wants to spend even more time with the dog.
Either way, I would
sleep with one eye. Better than Trent, I'll tell you that.
I would definitely sleep with one eye open, since you definitely announced her age on air over here and stuff too. Or we can see that wall behind you collapsing any second now as she barges into the room. So it should be an interesting night. Brian is with us as always. What's going on, Brian? And greetings from Houston. Nobody cares about the weather in Houston, by the way, Alan, just because it's freaking cold over here. Actually, it's not too shabby, but had like a ridiculous hailstorm yesterday. But it's good to be in Chicago. So a bunch of stuff to get to. BJ is taking a few weeks off. He'll be back with us shortly. But here's the good news, guys. We still have trivia. And here's the good news. Actually, before BJ volunteered and really put in some tricky questions for you guys, well, I know about tricky because even Bickler was getting him right. But I actually got this from Layla for Christmas. It's a Liverpool FC trivia book because she knows how much. I don't know if it's a gift for me. It's more like a gift for you guys. I take it as because she knows how much you guys like trivia. So the trivia is going to be coming from there. Don't be shaking your heads. Thank Layla. Okay.
This is what I get. I joined one family vacation and they're all trying to pay me back all these years later.
That's exactly what it is. It just proves that she dislikes us as much as her father.
Basically, yeah. Bickler joined us in Outer Banks once, and ever since she's been trying to find a way to get back at him. So, and this is a great way over here. Here we go. Who was the first signing of the Premier League era for Liverpool?
Oh. Welcome back, Timuchin.
No more beach balls for you bastards. We're going back to tricky questions.
First of all, if you're not giving us multiple choice on this, there is zero chances I even say a name because I'm not embarrassing myself.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you multiple choices. Okay, here we go. Jesus Christ. You guys are really spoiled. A, Torben Piechnik. B, Paul Stewart. C, David James. And I'll throw a D, Mo Salah. So, making life easier for you guys. So, what is the answer? I even broke it down. So, I'm not even counting it at this point if you guys get it right. But partial credit goes to Bickler. Your guess?
I'll go C.
You going with David James?
Yeah. I mean, I think the other two are way too obscure.
Medusa Steven Gerrard.
I was about to say it.
I know when I'm being mocked.
Just to be a jerk.
I should have made that the D. Alan says David James as well.
How is it possible I'm always such a low-hanging fruit for everyone?
I'm gonna just get this is straight up not agreeing with Bickler because usually there's a 50% chance you're right if you do that. So I'm gonna just guess like I would have in elementary school and say B because even you couldn't pronounce the first guy's name.
Yeah, honestly, I don't even remember what I said for B, but either way, you're wrong, and somehow Bickler is right. Only giving partial credit.
David James.
It is David James. And actually, as I looked into this afterwards, I was kind of shocked to see how many games do you guys think David James has played for Liverpool?
I think he did. I think he had a pretty good run for a while, didn't he?
That's not an answer, is it? Give me a number, Paul. He played a lot.
Listen, you get one trivia question. You ask it, sir. This is a Wendy's.
BJ says, greeting from South Carolina. I bet you guys miss me now. And yes, they do. Yes, they do. So give me a ballpark number, Gally. How many games do you think he has played?
150.
Bickler is playing Prices Right over there. Come on down, Bickler.
I'll go 149.
149. No, that's kind of what I would have guessed, to give you guys credit. 277 games. That seems awfully right. It seems awfully high. I did not think that would be that high of a number, but yeah, 277 games he's played for Liverpool. Conceded 273 goals in that time. He was one of those goalies. Right. Alan says 250 to 275. I think we're going all over the place giving ranges, but yes, just barely missed it. But yeah, I was around the 150 range as well. I didn't think he had played so many games. But trivia's back. You guys are wrong. So let's get back into action. Let's take a couple of public service announcements here. The podcast we did, the interview we did with the official supporter club in Turkey just got released. So if you guys want to take a look, you can see it at the YouTube channel. And we just made a posting on Facebook as well as Twitter. So you can kind of click on the link there. It's a short interview, about like 15 minutes or so, but kind of gives you a concept of what they're doing to help the earthquake area. And also get some like more background information, because he was literally boots on the ground and he was somebody that was there. But definitely good information there. Definitely recommend checking that out. And our silent auction is coming soon. More than likely we'll be starting next week. Thanks to Anfield's shop over here, they contribute a bunch of items. So we're going to have about like 30 to 40 items in the auction. We're also doing a fundraiser via Facebook as well, but more information coming on that soon. But want to throw that out there, as well as this thing over here. You've seen some crappy shirts online, I'm sure, for the 7-0 game. So this is a much better one. Actually, thanks to Tim Scheifel, this was one of the options they had for the Cleveland group. But when it wasn't selected, we got all over it, and we're going to have 10 of these made. It's going to be just a limited edition thing just for the silent auction over here. So obviously, with no games happening, I don't know how much you're enjoying the international break, Gally. I know Bickler is what international break. So Gally, let's start with you. How are you liking the international break, especially now that these games have almost like zero meaning, no coach, especially for the US team? It's kind of tricky because it's not even like, let's see what this new guy is doing, because there is no new guy.
Yeah, no, but I'll be honest, that I care more about how the players play, and the ones that did play, and they were always going to romp Granada. We knew that, but the way that they played and the fact that Pepe started, which after being left out of the World Cup, I mean, there were a lot of things Berhalter did, right? Other than just embarrass himself over the spat with the whole, the whole Reina family and that whole drama. There was a lot Berhalter did that just made no sense. And really leaving Pepe out of the roster completely was one of the major things. You finally find a striker. So to bring him back into the fold and see him score a couple goals and look good, I think that's important. I think it's always important when Pulisic is the best player, and he absolutely was the best player on the pitch that night for the United States, and I think that's important. So I think there's a little bit you can glean out of this. And I'll tell you what, this will be classic United States. They'll go out, they'll win 3-4 games under this guy, and then they'll appoint him thinking this is the right decision. And then they'll go 4 more years of absolute rudderless when they realize they hired a guy that's not qualified. So that would be par for the course for this group of knuckleheads. But I think when you're playing, when your best players are actually playing and they're playing well, it can't be a total detriment, especially when it's just Nations League. It's not like this is World Cup qualifying. Oh, wait, we don't have to qualify for the World Cup. We bought our spot.
Pretty much, yeah. That's what Turkey is trying to do. But along with Greece, they're like, hey, we're never going to qualify. Let's just host the goddamn thing. How about you, Bickler? Have you caught any of the games? Have you been watching, or what are you doing?
No, it seems like a lot of unnecessary drama. I'm paying attention to the NFL offseason.
By the way, I was just pulling it up. If you want, we can play that clip as well of unnecessary pet drama fantasy football.
Oh God, the stories. Yeah. NFL offseason, a little bit of this March Madness stuff. Not as much as in past years, but loving what NIL and transfer portal is doing to the rest of the college basketball game right now. But yes, I've been focusing on everything else and just giving myself a brain break and instead mentally linking myself to every available midfielder, just like the newspapers.
Yeah, we'll get to that next because that's, I think, what everybody is doing, just watching the games to get the names of midfielders. So they can like be linked with them, or we can start monitoring them and all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, I mean, apart from the obviously like Turkey's game, which was a painful win, but it's still a win, I guess. Kind of scared of what's going to happen tomorrow here after watching that game against Armenia away. This one is home, at least, against Croatia, Modric and stuff, so that could be scary. But aside from that, yeah, I watched the beginning of the France-Netherlands game, which looked like a massacre right off the bat, and then watched a little bit of the Poland game today. But here you go. See, right away, right off topic, since you said it, this is how our friend Bickler, and this is like an old episode. We're gonna look awfully young.
Oh no,
we're gonna look
nothing
awfully
like
young,
watching yourself
this
back.
is how you came up with your fantasy football team name. Pet drama, which we'll talk one day about why we have called that, why he has called that team on This Is a Pet Drama. It is the stupidest
best
so
name ever.
It is so Bickler. So I guess we might as well cover it. So Bickler and I were talking as we annually visit Outer Banks with my family, and then we like share it with another family as well, Angie's relatives actually, and then their daughter comes and they have like a German Shepherd, and that thing is like a freaking beast, by the way. It's just ridiculous, whips around his tail like a freaking. So anyway, so I was telling Bickler about that, so who visited us in the house actually, and I told him that like they bring the dog, and obviously we bring Stitch. Everybody who listens to the podcast, I'm sure, knows Stitch by now. So we bring Stitch, and there's like a lot of tension because Stitch, even though he can only lick people to death, wants to get protective of the household, doesn't want another dog hanging out with the girls or us and stuff, wants to be the one on the top floor, whatever. And their dog is the same way, and they have like a little baby now, so he's protective. So I told him there's like a lot of growling and, one upstairs, one divided. So I told him there's a lot of unnecessary pet drama in the house when we go there. And this, I'm telling you, I told him this
It's so good.
June or May. So the fantasy league starts in like August, and he's like, "Oh, you got to check out my team name," and he has named this freaking team Unnecessary Pet Drama. I literally occasionally watch that, and by the way, yeah, we come a long way with that.
It will never not be funny. It will never not be funny. And God, we look so young and full of life. How long ago was that?
And honestly, that was only like 18.
Was doing good.
That was like 18 months ago.
Dude, we all look like thinner and happy. Like, it's wild.
This recent run really have aged us like a decade or something. That's what it looks like based on the background and everything. Oh, man. Okay.
I also feel like we all got a lot closer to the screens. That is a lot, that is for sure. Because we were all like deep set. Timuchin, you look like you were in the witness protection program. You were literally in the background. Any moment your face could just go out and come back in. I was just sitting in that little back bedroom where one of the listeners had to tell me to put something over the box because they were reading off like what we were shipping people for shower gifts. There, so you can read the box names behind me. So yeah, we have come a long way with our fake background.
It's crazy to see us looking better before we had hair and makeup. Now, like
yeah, it is scary.
That's another thing.
Oh
yeah.
God.
But yeah, good times. Yeah, I occasionally pop that in just for the laughs over there. But yeah, we have aged a decade. So to get back to our younger days, we're constantly, since it's a national break, there's a lull. You can only have so many clickbait posts about other stuff. So the media is all over anybody and everybody related to Liverpool. So let me ask you guys this, because I literally normally hate talking about this stuff, but obviously there's a lot of talk about certain players more than others. Mason Mount is probably like one of the ones that is more. I mean, Bellingham talk is too old to even like refer to. I think is like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Blah blah blah. But let's talk about Mason Mount, because it feels like, to me, it's like an ideal fit. And I think we talked about it before. I think Gally, like you talked about it as well, in terms of like, being able to fill in for Mo and stuff like that too. I think you guys were talking about on the Thursday night. How realistic do you think that is? We know Chelsea is going to have to sell some people, but is it realistic for Chelsea to do, like, let him go to a competitor like us?
Well, I don't think they're going to have much of a choice. If they put Mason Mount up for sale, again, the player has to agree to go somewhere, right? Like, he has to go sign a new contract and agree to the agent fees. Will they make it harder for him to come to Liverpool than, say, Newcastle? I think they would. I also think they'll make it harder. They'll make it much easier and maybe even cheaper if he's willing to, say, go to Spain or go to Italy. But I really don't see that in Mason Mount's makeup. He looks like an English player. One, he's proven himself as an everyday player in the Premier League, which financially means you want to stay in the Premier League because they're making more money here than anywhere else. I don't know if you guys saw it, that Bournemouth has the third highest payroll of any of the any Italian team. They'd have the third highest payroll. And there are 4 championship teams with higher payrolls than Bournemouth. So that like lets you know what the finances are like in England. So why is this guy going to leave? Let's be realistic. If you told me I could have anyone from Chelsea, as much as I would love like the young N'Golo Kante that showed up from Leicester, if you told me I was getting like this version of any player, Reece James isn't healthy enough to actually take his talents and wrap them all up into one. So I think, honestly, I would pick Mason Mount because he's proven at this level, and I think he offers what we need. Multiple positions in midfield, and to Paul's point, he's actual top level, not Mo level, but top level cover on the right. And I think he gives you a dimension that you don't have, and there's a little steal in there too. And I think with the right managing style and role, I think he could flourish in our system. But it will take some tweaks to our system.
So I'm assuming, Bickler, you'd be all over that too as a possibility. I guess the question that I want to ask is, how much of an impact do you think, like in both the Bellingham talks and the Mason Mount talks, how much of an impact does the availability? Because we were talking about this last week in terms of which midfielder. We even had like a short go out in terms of like Henderson, Fabinho, and stuff like that. And I think one thing that I was listening to it afterwards, and I was like, man, we forgot to mention how much of a recruiting effect Hendo can have possibly on both these players. You think that's overrated, or would these guys say, hey, if I'm going to go somewhere new, I'd rather have a captain like this who I already know, I'm comfortable with, and I know will do anything and everything to make me successful. Will care about my success, I guess.
Yeah, I think we universally agree on that. I mean, I think it plays a big part.
How much of a factor do you think? Like, do you think, is it going to trump a lot of
big.
money?
I think it's big, and I'm not afraid to say the B word. I think it's big for Bellingham too. Like, I really do. Like, I think that like that relationship that Hendo had all through camp, that sort of natural mentorship, and then sort of dovetailed in with the close relationship with Trent, who's closer to age with him. So it's almost like a dad and a brother like pairing. Like I think it's like, I can't emphasize that enough for both them. And then of course Mount in the fold too. And I think there's a lot of stuff. I still have a couple question marks about how Mount would fit in terms of what he would be required to do in that midfield defensively. But I think I agree with Gally. I think that like anytime that Chelsea has been at their best, it's because Mason Mount has been at his best. I think that if you look at like that sort of short window in which Chelsea was kind of buffering in third, second, fourth, toggling in and out of those positions for a while, they were really humming with their youth players, their young kids, and really all that sort of additional like veteran pieces that they'd acquired from throughout Europe were kind of on the periphery when Chelsea was doing well. And I think Mason Mount brings a ton. So yeah, I would love that. But I think that sort of, I do think that Hendo's role has a big. I think that's a big thing. I don't think that you can underscore that. I don't know.
So, how about you, Gally? I mean, you think it's something that we can? How effective is it? I mean, I'm sure it's a factor. If like Mason Mount or Bellingham are comparing teams, they're looking at it, and I'm sure it's a factor. But is it like just this car has heated seats, or is this car is like right in my budget and I'll go for it? How big of an impact do you think it has to lure them, or is it something like they're like, it'd be nice, but I don't care as much?
I think it depends sometimes on the player and on the actual leadership role of the person. So I'll give you an example. I think that having Virgil van Dijk at Liverpool was absolutely critical in Cody Gakpo deciding to not wait for United and come to Liverpool. He knew a player that he spoke the language. He knew guys that understood the culture, who could tell him what it was going to be like, how the training was going to be, what the city was like. And I think that was really important. And he said so, right? He said it himself. It was really big for him. He knew he had Ten Hag there, but he really knew that he had Virgil, a player, a contemporary, and someone he'd probably talked to about it in the past. So I think it's really important there. I think in Bellingham's case, it's all important. It's about the culture at the club. It's about the history. It's about the contracts. It's about the manager. I genuinely think Bellingham is making a 10-year career decision knowing there is still time to go to Madrid or go to Barcelona and play overseas. I've already played overseas and proven I can do that. Like, he wants to be captain of England, and he said it. I don't know if you guys saw the post-match cuddle between him and Steven Gerrard. It was basically like this close to like UEFA freaking bringing on charges for tapping up a player. Because he basically did everything but tell him he would put him in his room. Like, you can stay in my house at my place rent-free. You can have my number. I'll make you captain.
I was waiting for HR to get involved.
It was close. I mean, it was this close. I mean, if Steven Gerrard was awake that much the day that Dele Alli stopped by camp, he might have ended up at Liverpool. Who the hell knows? And that's a train wreck for its own day, as is being played out in Turkey as we speak. But I genuinely do think that it is really, really important. But I also think that there's differences. Like, I think Mason Mount will make a stone decision on his own. He's a grown man. He's been in England a long time. I think, would he like to play with some friends? Sure, but he's got friends on every club. He's got some friends at United. I'm sure he's got some friends at City. He's got some friends at Arsenal, right? And he's going to have his pick. It's where does he see himself? And if I'm a young English midfielder, I want to be one of the people who goes back to Liverpool and turns it around. I don't want to be the guy who joins Arsenal's winning brigade. I don't want to be the next mercenary at City. So really, it's go to United or go to Liverpool. And it's sad to say this. It's probably easier to fight your way into our midfield and into our starting 11 right now at Liverpool than it is at United, as sad as that is to say. So I think it makes all the sense in the world for Mason Mount to come, whether he loves Henderson or has that or not. But I think having real good leadership and a good locker room, dressing room, I think that's good anytime you're a player looking to come into a new place. Because when you have a shit dressing room, no offense, Paul, and a shit locker room, you end up being the big ticket item that goes to Detroit and tries to turn around a franchise that hasn't been turned around in 25 years. And it's a hell of a lot harder than showing up at a place that already has a structure and a culture, and you're just there to like make it better. And I think for Bellingham especially, Liverpool is the perfect landing spot. So just sign the goddamn contract.
Yes, bring him on already. Boris says the fucking dream team is on. I told my wife to get off me. Between him and Gally,
you don't have to put all of these up there. It's not a requirement to put these up.
We're going to be sponsored by a divorce lawyer next week. I'm assuming thanks to these guys, we might be fielding some calls for the sponsor.
My lord.
So let me ask you guys this now. Bickler, out of, I kind of like one with these names. There's obviously a ton of other names we're interested in, we're monitoring, and he has a release clause and it's bitten another club likes his hair, all that kind of stuff. Give me a name that, maybe kind of flies under the radar that you are the most excited about.
Oh, God. Under the radar, that's difficult because I think this is the window where we got to hit the big ones. I think we got to have a multiple big ones. I think it's got to be Bellingham, Gvardiol. Even though Leipzig says he's not going this window, you got to hit it now before that release clause kicks in. Off the radar. Well, it was off the radar until today, but I would say James Ward-Prowse was one we talked about that I really like. That one hit the papers today, and honestly, I was reading the stuff online, and it's just hilarious the amount of Liverpool supporters that were bashing that as he's not our level, as if any of them have spent more than 15 minutes watching Southampton, because if they had, you'd realize that he is an immediate improvement stepping into this midfield. He's much more than just a free kick artist. So that's kind of one that was off the radar that popped up today. There is so many available options for midfielders. There's so many. I mean, I'd take Paulinho from Fulham, who we've had interest in. I think he'd be a really nice move. He wouldn't cost a ton of money. We've talked about Nunes, who we swung and missed, apparently turned down, and now would like to buy for double. So he's there. But there's so many options. I mean, you've got Ugarte at Sporting, who's kind of a scrappy, can play to the defensive mid and stretch throughout. So you've got a ton of there's a ton of available options that aren't crazy expensive.
How about you, Gally? Any names that you're like, man, I really want him? Because the names I threw out are the most, top level ones that any fan, because it goes back to what Bickler's talking about. Some of these players, fans just know by name if you're not following that league and stuff like that. I mean, but in the Premier League or any league that you watch, any guy that you see that you're like, that will be good, then it's not talked about enough, let's say.
Well, I always pronounce the guy's name wrong, but I know you know it because he was at your club last year. But I believe the best center back to play a minute at Anfield this year is the South Korean center back who plays for Napoli.
Kim.
And he's supposedly up and has a $35 to $43 million release clause. So you can basically just steal him from Napoli by triggering his release clause. Now, if you told me that you could sign him and he would be your third center back and the future pairing for Konate long term, I would tell you that you might be saving $50 million. I love Gvardiol. I think he's a great player. I don't know if he'll go, and I don't know if we would be able to get him. The Vieira kid from Celta Vigo is another one that's everyone's hot and heavy on. I know Alan just mentioned him. That was one that I was going to mention as well. But you know what's going to happen? It's going to be some guy out of Portugal we've never heard of, because that's what this club seems to do. And I just think that they seem like they're in a feeding mode in that way. I think there'll be a midfielder or two from the Premier League, and then I think there will be a couple fringe players. But I think really what we have to look at, whether we like it or not, this club has to sign a formidable right back that can come in next year and actually put up some form of minutes against Trent. Because honestly, Ramsey coming off injury, you can't do anything but send the kid out on loan. In my opinion, he should go out on loan next year just to let him restart his career. And I think you got to sign a right back. You can't go into next year having Gomez be your forward center back and your right back and change your tactics all around all the time. I really believe there has to be a look at some form of right back. And let's be honest, there is a plethora of talented right backs in the Premier League.
Yeah, and I don't know, is Ramsey even going to be back by then? I know, they were saying, it's like a big-time injury. Bosses Hakimi, I doubt it, and I don't know if I'd be for it, because he's one of those guys that, good in FIFA, because he has a lot of speed, but I don't know if he is as good defensively, to be honest with you, but definitely great going forward. So, are you a fan, since you said right back, are you talking more to be able to kind of push Trent to maybe track people, or are you putting Trent more in midfields?
I'm not talking crazy. I've been through this. Until Jurgen Klopp is no longer the manager, it's not worth the conversation, because he shuts people down at every impasse about it. So this would be someone to push Trent along, someone to, if Pep can replace a guy who was the player of the year from the year before within 3.5 weeks of making their professional debut, Trent can be pushed by a Rico Henry or another young right back of, similar Premier League level. I'm not talking you're not buying someone to take his job.
Okay, so you're more talking like a Ramsey, but somebody you can count on is going to be available, kind of a deal.
Yeah, I think you need it. I think we're proving right now Trent has played too much football and is still currently playing too much football, in my opinion.
So, what do you think, Bickler? If
I agree with all
a name like that, would it be? Is there a chance that guy can get pushed to midfield, or it will be just more of a rotation and giving him some rest?
Trent is never going to be pushed to midfield. So here's what I don't understand. Okay, so what are Trent's best attributes? The long diagonal over the top, delivery from the wing, right? Those are probably his greatest attributes. What are his greatest weaknesses? Positional awareness? Yeah, probably we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So you go to midfield and you basically put him in the most positionally demanding spot on the field, and you ask him to perform there when his weakness is positional awareness, and then you lose all the stuff that he does from the wing. It makes absolutely no sense to me to move in the midfield. The only reason people want to move in the midfield is because he gets forward. Which is very
feel like then his defensive or his lack of awareness in terms of positioning will not be a factor, but
it'll be more of a factor.
Now it's going to be even bigger factor because you're going to leave your back line exposed.
Yeah, that's always been my point.
I'm just wondering what your guys think.
So that's why I just feel like the conversation to move Trent to midfield just needs to be shut down, period, because it doesn't make any sense logically. If you just look at things that we universally agree on,
every time he makes a defensive error, Gally, I think it comes right back up because people are trying to solve that problem by making another problem somewhere else.
Everybody wants him on the pitch, but nobody wants to watch his mistakes. So ultimately, what it comes down to, right, is we make him a right wing, and then he's basically a backup because he's really fast and he has skills and he has a great wand of a foot. But we've all seen, his finishing is okay, but it's not like he's a striker. He's not an offensive-minded player that thinks about taking a player on and going to shimmy a goalie and take him low to the side, right? And that's okay. That's never been what he's been trained to do. So I agree. When people talk about moving him forward, I always shut it down and say, well, Klopp was never going to do it, so it's a non-starter. But the real thing is if you move him to the position you could, it's right wing, and then he just becomes mediocre. And he's like Stuart Downing with a really good cross, except for he's a little fatter and a little less pudgy.
He doesn't have the pace, I don't think, for a winger and stuff either.
Right.
So, yeah, I think,
he's a flawed right back.
Yeah, ultimately it's going to be, I think what we have in mind is more of a signing like Ramsey who can kind of push Trent because it feels like right now he does not have an alternative. And is that his problems? No, but something has to force him to kind of focus on improving his weaknesses. It almost looks like it's not there right now, but I guess we'll see what the offseason brings in that sense. So let's start looking ahead. So I'm going to give you guys the April schedule over here. And then, so a total of 7 games right here. So 21 points up for grabs in the Premier League. Away to City, Chelsea, Leeds, West Ham, and at home against Arsenal, Forest, and Tottenham. Bickler, let us start with you. 21 points up for grabs. How many do you think we will need to keep the top 4 hopes alive? And how many do you think we will get out of the 21?
I think you're going to need, logically, I think you can drop points in maybe 3 fixtures, maybe.
And that's even.
That's pushing it
too, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's probably pushing it. So, I think you're going to have to come away with in that 17-18 range at the very least, 17-18 points out of that. And I got to tell you, with this team versus the way that schedule stacks up, that is an extremely big ask.
How about you, Gally? How many do you think we should get? We will.
So, I mean, should get. I would love to get 16 points out of that, maybe 5 wins and a draw, and you get a loss and but we really going to go 5-1-1 over the next 7 with that fixture list. So it all stems down to, I do think we're getting City at the perfect time. I think you want City coming off an international break because all their players go off on international duty and play lots of minutes. We'll see what this Haaland thing is. This feels like normal City shenanigans. They're saying he's actually not training, like hasn't been able to train this entire time. He went back and has been on the treatment table, and he's like a real doubt for the match on Saturday. If he didn't play and Foden doesn't play, I think you're into it. The one thing I'll say is we've taken, on average, more points from the top half of the table this year than we have the bottom half. So we play better when we play against opposition that play football against us. And I think Chelsea, City, and Arsenal will all try to do that. Leeds doesn't know anything else. And we should be able to get a result against Forest. And I'm forgetting
West
who
Ham
the
away.
And that's going to be the sneaky tough one that it always is when we play West Ham away. I could see that end up being like a 1-1 draw and pissing me off and ruining all of this. Like we'll beat Arsenal and City, and then we'll literally drop points against Forest and West Ham. I think we have to get 16 minimum. I think we should be shooting to get 18 points out of that, but we haven't proven we can get 6 out of 7.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think my ideal scenario was probably like 16, kind of like what you were saying in the beginning, like 5 wins and a draw, and then you lose 1, take your pick kind of thing. And that's the problem is you would think when we look at that schedule, yeah, you're like, okay, 3 from Forest, you just can't do that. And that's probably the problem we have with this team, that you can't do that. And one thing, going back to what you were saying, Bickler, is I'm almost more worried in some ways I would normally not be the Chelsea game, mainly because it's coming 3 days after the City game. And going into the City game, you might be able to start that game with a rested, healthy, 100% Hendo and Fab and stuff. And that's when this midfield kicks off. What will we do on Tuesday if we do that? I mean, out of these games, like, which one are you worried about the most?
I'm probably still worried about the City game the most. Alan puts it in here, early kickoff away. And we've been absolute garbage away early this year, everywhere we've gone. And so we're going to go up against probably the toughest and deepest side in the entire league and expect for that to improve is, like I said, a big ask, but we'll see. I don't feel like we ever play well coming off of breaks ourselves. I feel like all of that stuff is really stacking up in an unfavorable way. And the City one, man, I hate to say it, but it's almost like I want to mentally prepare for that just being chalked off as an L and then going on and recouping points from there. Right. But and I think you said it perfectly when you said you can't look at any team in this league and count it as an automatic 3 points for us. And that's our problem. So for various reasons, whether you want to say,
and
tactics,
I think, the City game, whatever. I'm hoping, having that midfield intact, 100% rested, not played before, barring the early game thing is, going to be tricky, I guess, for City as well. But still, our record speaks for itself when it's the early game. But Gally, you think, is that not a bigger problem, the Chelsea game, not being able to turn this team around? Like going back to what Bickler was saying, we don't play against Arsenal until Sunday. And then it kind of goes back until we get to West Ham. We don't do this 3-4 day thing. With me, I feel like I worry more now about that because a Henderson that's at 60% is not cutting the mustard. And then
honestly, I think that maybe Fab will get starts in both matches. He didn't go on international duty, I don't believe, with Brazil right now. So he's actually been resting. So he's not actually overexerting and flying half across the continent, etc. I think Fab probably starts both those matches, and it's probably a rotation with Henderson and Elliott and somebody on the left. I feel a little better purely because it looks like Diaz will be back in training at least by the end of next week, so he might be fit for the Arsenal match. You already have Nunez, Gakpo, Mo, Jota, and Bobby. So up top, I'm a little bit more comfortable. And let's be honest, yes, the midfield is very important, but we're gonna either score goals or not score goals, and that's how we're gonna beat these teams. Like if we get 16 to 21 points out of those 7 matches, it's because the front 3 keep up what they were doing, and Gakpo gets more comfortable every minute, and Nunez, maybe honestly, when Diaz comes back, Nunez just becomes the hurricane that comes off the bench and just wins matches for you late. Because that might be his role the rest of the way, is just come on and torment teams. I've said this for a while now. I'm not worried about running down Spurs. I think Spurs are going to absolutely drop. Not because Conte's gone. I just think it's just a train wreck and they're an unbalanced team. I'm most worried about Brighton, because I think Brighton has everything. De Zerbi is pulling every string correctly. He rotates, it works. I'm actually worried about Brighton being the team that we end up not being able to catch for 4th place. And we finish like 2-3 points behind Brighton, watching them go off to play in Europe. And we're sitting in 5th, getting ready for, Thursday, Sunday matches next year. Trips to Azerbaijan or wherever the hell they go in the Europa League.
So let me ask you this then, Bickler. Let's go talk about Diaz, because Gally mentioned it. How big of a role do you want to give, or do you want to risk Diaz, or does it just solely depend on where we are at the time in terms of points and standing?
I think I don't know if it matters where we're at the standings, to be quite honest, because I guess where I lay emotionally with this is like, I don't believe that we're likely getting the same Diaz back, especially not at the very beginning. So to me, regardless of where we are in the standings, it doesn't make sense to either A, risk further injury to somebody who's already been re-injured on the same injury again, or B, disrupt the flow of the starting sort of rotation that we have between Jota and Diaz and Bobby and the sort of the left and central side of that thing. So I would probably ease Diaz in regardless. We all remember him dragging us over the line last year. I just don't think that we can let that be the sort of first thought in our head in regards to, in fairness to him and in protecting an asset, right? So, I mean, I think that if he does come back and he is electric, that thing's got to organically happen over time as he grows into it. I don't think just forcing him out there is the move.
And that's my concern, I guess. We already delayed him coming back. I mean, he was supposed to be back around the World Cup, so we pushed that back further due to the injury. So, and you don't want something happening again. While we do, it got forgotten, Gally, that he was probably by far our best on the pitch player after Ali in goal before his injury. And with the arrival of Gakpo and Nunez and stuff like that, it kind of got forgotten. You think he'll be able to come back and make that impact, and it is worth the risk to throw him out there to carry us over the line like Bickler was saying he did in the past?
I didn't mean but we do know this manager. If the dude looks good in training and the physios tell him he's fit to play and he thinks he gives them the best chance to win, that dude's going out there to play. This is the one thing this guy does. To Paul's point, right? He had no problem literally running the tires off every single midfielder that we've had for the last 8 years. And as they got a little old and the tires were our tread, he was like, all right, Genie, best of luck to you. Go get that money at PSG. Wish you the best, Emre Can. I'll roll you. And you could tell me you're leaving at the end of the season. He doesn't even stop playing. I mean, he put Keita back on the pitch after he basically told him to go bleep himself for half of the season because he needed him. So if the guy's fit and in training, I think he's going to play. I think Diaz will see a lot of minutes between now and the end of the year because I think Klopp absolutely loves what he brings to the side. And I am with Paul. I think it's a wait and see on what we get. But I do think he's going to get minutes. And I feel better about him getting extra minutes than more opportunities for Ox.
Damn you. I knew you were going there. But
I got 3 more months, man. I got 3 more months of that goddamn joke.
Dude, I was on the edge of my that's just messed up. I was on the edge of my seat with that point, and Timuchin knew it was coming. I don't know if I was asleep in the pre-production meeting or what.
You were not even present at the pre-production meeting. But anyway,
I think so.
so
Fair.
I mean, Keita actually got a goal today, I think, if I saw that right earlier in an international game. So let me I was going to ask you that when you mentioned Ox there. Bickler, let's start with you. Between Ox, Jones, Keita, who will get the most minutes until the end of the season?
Jones. I don't feel good saying that though. If I could pick, I'd probably pick 0 for all three, to be quite honest. I mean, I think we'll probably be in a shoot though, dude. I don't know, man, because if you're in a pinch, I think Keita probably gets on over Jones. I think there's going to be. Here's the thing: if you're in a pinch, I think Keita's on if we're in a pinch and we need, like, we're actually trying to win something. If it's a rotational game where we're in a spot where we're rotating, I feel like Jones gets that. But we haven't seen that in a long time. I'm changing my mind. I'm going Keita.
Really? Okay. How about you, Gary?
So I'm gonna say Keita, but I'm gonna preface it that I don't think any of them are really gonna play any meaningful minutes. If you ask me which ones will get the most starts, I believe Keita will start more matches than Jones and Ox combined, because I think he'll start 1 or 2 out of matchup and out of need, out of that rotational necessity that you're talking about, Timuchin. There's no way, and this is also going to have a lot to do with whether or not Thiago's old ass ever gets back on the pitch. You notice we stopped hearing about Thiago? It was like a couple days, a couple weeks. Then it was just like, Thiago is gone. Like, it was almost like they wiped him off Instagram. Like, they're just like basically pretending like he's not there, because they have no idea when this calf is going to heal, because he's struggled with these type of injuries. And we've been actually really lucky. The type of injuries he's had at Liverpool haven't been the normal Thiago injuries. They've actually been like Richarlison taking out a knock on his bone and like actually hurting the dude. It's normally muscle stuff with him, and it's kind of a wait and see approach. And I think because of Thiago, Keita skills and role is more required. And honestly, for me, I think Klopp is done with Jones. Like, I think the Jones experiment has ended. He turned 24, and literally the pumpkin, it became midnight, and the pumpkin changed back into, or the chariot changed back into a pumpkin, and Jones and Cinderella had no spot left for at the ball. Like, that dude is literally gonna hope that Crystal Palace still wants him when they're playing in the championship next year.
Who says Gally doesn't like kids? He's doing like freaking like fairy tale references and shit over here. So okay, but here's my thing. So you guys both said if something is needed, like if we have to like win, you threw the Keita name out there. You guys okay there? I'm not even gonna go there. Okay.
I caught myself in telling a joke that I was never, ever, ever gonna get back. So I guess we could clip that shit, and what we're clipping is me actually thinking before I said something stupid.
No, so let's go back to Keita. I mean, do you guys think really in a pinch? Because Bickler, you said, if we have to win, like if it's an important game with Keita, who's kind of already looks like checked out now. By then, he will have, only 2. He'll have to do laundry probably every 2 days because he'll have his bags packed and ready to go. Do you think we put him in them with only like 4 or 5 games left in the season?
Well, I say that because his individual moments of brilliances have come with much more frequency than Curtis Jones's. Like, I mean, I feel like Curtis Jones is still trying to replicate the curler versus Everton or whoever he banged it in off of for the last 4 years. Yeah, for the last like 4 years. And I feel like look, dude, I think Naby's checked out. I think he's a really great player and a bad tactical fit. I think he was a player that I think would do well on another side with a different setup. And I think honestly, that's on us. Like, that's on us. And so there's a part of me that's empathetic to that situation. But I think he's capable of more from a quality standpoint, even if he's checked out, than a Curtis Jones, who I just think is not at his level right now.
Yeah. I'm going with Jones. And like you're saying, Gally, I don't think because he's going to get a lot of minutes. I feel like he's going to get a lot more of those it's the 82nd minute. We're either trying to kill a game or the game is already dead. So we're throwing Jones in there instead of Keita. I think he will accumulate points that way. So I'm going with Jones. It's going to be an interesting experiment. So mark your calendars at the end of the season. Let's see what we end up with. Either way, I think the less we see of that trio, probably the better in some ways. But so before we go, let's look ahead and do a prediction game for this weekend. Gally, let's start with you on this one. City away, bright and early in the freaking morning, 6:30 my time. Feel bad for the people out on the West Coast. What do you expect to see? And give us a result prediction.
Yeah, so I expect it to be a hard-fought match. I do think we'll show up. I think both sides will be a little sloppy, and I'm gonna say we show up and get a draw. And I'll say a score draw, either 1-1 or 2-2. And we'll probably have chances to win it. And we'll probably do something really stupid at the end to draw it or even lose it. And that, doesn't make me feel good going into it. But I'm going to call for a score draw.
That's what Shelton is going with. He said 2-2. Bickler, what do you have?
I mean, I'm not trying to pile on, but I was going to say 1-1. I just think it's going to be sort of a cagey affair where everybody gets one that's probably not super pretty.
Buzz says 3-1 win. I don't know. I'm hopeful in this game just because of what I said earlier. A midfield that's healthy, ready to go. And going back to what, Gally, you were talking about, we kind of get more up for these games. The only key thing is going to be, are we going to be able to convert? Because it will be a sloppy game. I think both teams will get a lot of opportunities. It's just a matter of, are we able to, is the front three going to be able to capitalize on those on finisher? Kind of like, we did with the United game where everything we touched turned into gold and stuff like that. So I'll go with a 3-2 win just because I like being the optimist in this gang over here. I just had a doctor's visit. He tells me to be optimistic for my health. So I'm going with the 3-2 win over there. Rest of the week, are you watching any international games over here, Gally? Who is U.S. playing?
No.
Do they have any games left?
I think they're on right now, actually. I'm not watching or recording or paying attention. I think they got, let's see. I think they have El Salvador. This is what they call terrible TV or radio, where you don't know what you're doing and you look down and you start checking on things. It is 0-0 against El Salvador right now. And they stink. 54th minute. So that's not that bad. El Salvador is not a terrible opponent. They actually have some talent on that roster. So better than the walk in the park against Grenada. I'll watch a little bit, but honestly, the World Cup, then this season and everything, I do feel like this international break more than ever was like literally a break from football. I know Paul said he's paying attention to the NFL offseason, watching the NCAA tournament. I watched more college basketball yesterday. I mean, literally yesterday, as in Sunday the 26th, than I watched the entire combination of the entire season, which means I watched the end of the Creighton game and all the Texas game. And I couldn't believe either things that I saw, and it made me realize I didn't miss much this year. But I'm with Paul. I like the anarchy of players actually. I like the anarchy of young, talented people who make all the money actually having some control and say in the money. And, it's pretty cool because I know it upsets people in North Carolina and Duke and Kentucky and all the places where they think they have a right to this shit. And for, these 2 weeks a month, but it was really cool seeing all these small schools win and all these kids ball out and literally not just ball out on the court, but then cry as they tell their stories and how proud they are, instead of hearing from some 19-year-old kid who got paid literally $300,000 under the table so he could play at Duke for 1 year and then go to the NBA. I'd much rather the fifth-year senior, 27-year-old at Princeton who's going to change the world with something he's doing. Having his one shining moment and maybe one less from Jim Nance. So there's my
I mean, that was been the thing with me with March Madness and stuff like that, to be honest. I mean, we're doing totally off topic, but always oh, they're playing for the purity of the game. Really? He's only playing 1 year at Duke. You think he's really playing very pure, that you're very naive. That's why it is kind of nice to see these stories more. And can they please stop trying to talk to a kid that just won a huge game on air right after the game and ask him, like, what was your mindset taking that shot? Shut
Oh, that poor kid.
Now, let the kid
That poor
celebrate.
kid.
Get the hell out of the way. It was just like, I did watch that Miami game afterwards, and I was like, man, let the kid celebrate with his team, the coach, and stuff like
Wow.
that.
Whoa,
And stop
whoa,
asking him
whoa,
what his
whoa.
mindset was taking that shot. Like,
You-
what do you
you-
expect?
We endorse the kids from we endorse the kids from the University of Miami, like having their inner celebration on the court, and like all hell could break loose and the city could burn down. Like that college has been known to take over a city with like 6 players at a time. All right, those guys look like they were ready to throw a UNLV like after party with hot tubs and all after they got to the Final Four last
They
night.
did look like
And
it, yeah.
damn, they
Listen,
deserved it.
I can tell you what. So weird story, and it's a long one, and I'm going to make it very short. My dad somehow lucked into meeting a couple of people. We got tickets. We won tickets in a lottery to a Final Four in New Orleans. Went to the Final Four. He leaves the fucking tickets in the printer at home. At home. So we have no tickets. We're at the
Runs in
Final
the
Four.
family.
He ends up connecting with somebody that had these like court row seats that work for the NCAA. We got 2 tickets. We stayed in touch with them, and they used to send us tickets to the Final Four. So me and my dad, we went to every Final Four for like 8 years. It was amazing. Anyway, that being said, when I went to my last one, I was like, I'm kind of over the Final Four experience. It's basically an extended 4-day party. It's amazing. People from all over these schools come in, and they take over whatever city, and it's essentially a 4-day booze cruise of mayhem. So I was like, this is a great experience. I'm aware that my dad's getting older. I'm getting older. I'm good with this. I at that point I started accumulating children. I had 2 of my own. So I was like, I'm good. And I was like, this will be my last Final Four. I'm so tempted to go back to the Final Four now that Miami's in it, because that shit is going to be crazy. Like half the people that try to go to the Final Four are probably already on the TSA no-fly list. Like, it is going to be wild.
And those are just alumni of the school
Yes.
that play
Yeah,
professional
exactly,
sports. And that's just Michael Irvin trying to book a hotel room.
That's just
He
the
can have
football
that
team from the
hotel.
80s.
But it says
Ah.
Israel, Switzerland tomorrow. Yeah, I'll be watching the horror show. That's going to be the game of Turkey against Croatia. It should be interesting. And then we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming. It is kind of like a nice break in action, to be honest with you. Because I think you're right, Gally. The World Cup and everything like that, it was like way over. Criminal use, says Brian. Poor Miami. We're not getting them as a sponsor. But yeah, I think it's going to be good to kind of like get back in the Premier League, finish this run off. And you never know, maybe we'll get the old, the boys back in their old form, kind of like how we looked in that video. We'll be young and happy and laughing again, having Bickler tell us fantasy football stories and stuff like that. But we'll be back Wednesday morning with Rami and Gordo. And Thursday night, obviously, as always, and we will have a guest this Thursday night podcast as well. So there's that third chair open. So if you want to hop on it, just shoot us a message and hop on in that chair. It does involve talking to Mecca and not making sure you're protecting your food. Yes, Ramadan is here. Ramadan Kareem to all the Muslim brothers and sisters. Yes, to everybody as well. And you guys have a great week. We will see you guys Wednesday morning, and then hopefully we're starting a huge run over here.